Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Sage 100 Sales Order Tips and Tricks webinar. I'd like to introduce everyone to Jody Patterson, our Client Care Manager, who will do some introductions and talk about some housekeeping today. Jody?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jody Patterson, as Pam said, Client Care Manager for Oasis Solutions. We are going to be presenting today sales order tips and tricks, and Pam Scott is going to be our expert on that. The housekeeping she mentioned is that your lines are muted and will be for the duration of the webinar, but we do want you to ask questions. I know that the intro slide was saying we would address questions at the end, but Pam will periodically stop as we go through the session, moving from one section to another. So please enter your questions into the questions window of the GoToMeeting area, and I will monitor those and prompt them to Pam when she takes breaks for questions. We'll also be recording the webinar today and send that out to everyone who registered. So if we don't get your questions answered during the session, we will also follow up with those offline. So let's get started. Pam, back to you.
Thank you, Jody. And again, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This month's webinar is going to focus on the sales order module, and just some basic information of why you would use sales order for invoicing your customers versus accounts receivable. Most of the time basically ties back to inventory. So if you have inventory that you're stocking or inventory that you're managing, then in order to sell inventory to a customer and have it relieved from your warehouse at the invoice data entry point, you would use sales order for that. However, you can also sell things through sales order that are not inventory based using miscellaneous charge codes and miscellaneous item codes, and we'll take a look at that shortly. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take just a quick look at a couple of things in the setup options. And the first thing that we're going to take a look at is cancel and reason code maintenance. And what this ties into, and I'll show you another screen in just a minute, is you have the ability to track deleted quotes and deleted sales orders within the sales order module. So if you want to track those numbers, those orders and quotes that are deleted, you can have it do generic tracking, or you can have it prompt you for a reason as to why you're canceling it. So maybe you send a quote out to someone, they decline it, they say, hey, you know what, I was able to find a much better price with your competitor, and we're not interested in ordering from you, and you want to cancel that sales order quote, then it's going to prompt you for a reason, and you would select better price found. These are, I believe they are 100% user-defined. There may be one or two that come standard with Sage, but you can add as many reason codes as you want in order for that listing, so they can be very specific to your business. And how you determine if these codes are to be used is in the sales order options under history. You have retain deleted orders and quotes, and your options are yes, no, or prompt. So if you say yes, then if you delete an order or a quote, it's just going to save it in your history. If you say no, then it's going to remove it from your history. And if you say prompt, that's when you go to delete it or cancel it. It's going to ask you for one of those reason codes. So there are some, some audit trail purposes about why you might want to track that type of information. You may want to do it from a standpoint, if you have a sales team and they use the quote feature, determine, why one salesperson seems to close more sales than, the next person. And you can take a look at the reasons that that salesperson is giving on why they're not able to close those quotes. And so this is to delete the entire order or quote. This is if you want to retain deleted lines. So let's say that you send a quote and it has 3 line items on it, and they say, you know what, we want to order line 1 and 2, but we don't want line 3. Then if this is set to prompt, your salesperson can remove line 3 from the quote before it's turned into an order, but they would have to give a reason for why they are deleting that as well. So again, a lot of people really want to track that or would like to be able to find out why things aren't closing, but didn't really realize that you could do that within Sage. So again, that is the cancel and reason code maintenance. And if you have not been utilizing this feature and you want to go in and make some changes, if the tax schedule estimated is no longer applicable, then you could delete that line, or you can add lines to this. So I wanted to show you that feature. And then the next thing that I want to show you in this setup is the miscellaneous item maintenance. So we talked a little bit right at the very beginning about using sales order if you have inventory. But you may also have items that you sell that are not inventory. For instance, maybe labor. You sell them a boiler, and that comes out of your inventory, but then there's also a $2,500 fee to install that boiler. Or maybe you sell extended warranties, anything of that nature. So miscellaneous item maintenance is where you can set up those non-inventory type things. So, and also, some companies do not physically have a warehouse. And when a customer places an order, they basically just turn around and order that from their vendor. So the client really doesn't know that they don't have, a warehouse full of 100 of a particular thing. So you could set up item codes as well where it kind of looks like an inventory, if that makes any sense. So when you go into miscellaneous item maintenance, there are 3 different things, types that you can set up. You can set up a miscellaneous item, you can set up a generic comment, or you can set up a charge. So I'm going to walk you through and just show you the differences of, especially between miscellaneous and charge, and why you might use one versus another. So the first one I'm going to do is just a miscellaneous code, and I'll just use a very simple description here for today's demo purposes. Obviously, you would want to give it a true item code. Then it's going to say, is this item miscellaneous, a charge, or a comment? So we're going to set up a miscellaneous item, and I'll just put in the description. I can add an extended description if I need to. That's perfectly fine. And for a miscellaneous item, I can put in a standard unit price. I can also put in my standard, unit cost. I can say whether or not this item is taxable. I can also say if there's a purchase tax class. If we're using commodity codes, you could select a commodity code. On the right side of the screen, you have sales unit of measure and purchase unit of measure. You can say whether or not that you are calculating commissions on this particular miscellaneous item. So if you have salespeople set up in your Sage 100, just like your inventory, in inventory maintenance, you can say whether an inventory item is subject to commission. You can also say whether or not a miscellaneous item is subject to commission as well. You have the option of linking an image to this item code. You can say whether or not this item code is used in multiple modules. So the screen that we're looking at now, you also have miscellaneous item maintenance where you could set it up at the AR level. You can also set it up at the purchase order level. So it's showing all of the modules that I currently use, which is accounts receivable, sales order, and purchase order, and it's saying, do you want to use it in these other modules? And you have the option to check whether or not you want them to be available within those modules as well. The accounts, this is where you would set up, which in our demo, or I don't have anything set up, actually this is a new item, but I could put in my sales account, my cost of goods account, my inventory account, and my purchases account. And then the history is just going to give me kind of a real quick look at quantities. It's going to give me a look at sales, and it's going to give me a look at receipts from the PO standpoint. So I can go in and just kind of take a quick look at the history of that particular miscellaneous item. So what I want you to take a look at is this particular setup screen when it's set to miscellaneous. One rule of thumb is that if you are going to sell multiple quantities of this item on a sales order, so let's say that my unit price is $10. If I'm wanting to sell 10 of these on a sales order at $10, to be able to have that unit of measure and have it do the calculation for me, you would want to use a miscellaneous code. The next example is going to do just a charge code and show you what a charge code looks like. So I'm going to select that it's charge. And you'll notice that basically this screen looks the same. Now, I am working in the 2018 version. If you are on an older version of Sage, you are not going to have the unit of measure, the prices unit of measure, and that type of information, because a charge code is more of a one-off code. So let's say that anyone that purchases a boiler, the installation charge is a flat $2,500 regardless. So that's when you would use a charge code versus using something where we're going to charge you $100 an hour and we estimate it's going to be 25 hours. But if you do notice, when I go to the accounts tab, that my cost of goods and my inventory account is grayed out. So there is no type of posting where it's going to track any entry to your GL for those two accounts. And when you go to history, you do not have the quantities, but you can look at your sales or receipts. So does anybody have any questions about that? But typically a charge code is for something that is really not an item, but more of a service charge, a restocking fee, a core charge, extended warranty, something of that nature. And then the last...
Yet.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, there are no questions yet.
Oh, I apologize. I misunderstood. Thank you, Jody. So the next item that we have talked about is doing a miscellaneous comment. And so this miscellaneous comment may be thank you. And we want to say this is a comment and it's thank you. And then we actually have a text box. So thank you for your order. If you have questions, call. And I can, continue putting information on here. And then when you're going to do a sales order, which I'll show you in just a few minutes, you would actually then select that comment code to drop in on the sales order and or the invoice. And the reason for this is most of you that use sales order and or purchase order know that you can do a /C at sales order entry, sales order invoice entry, or purchase order entry to indicate you want to add a comment line, but it doesn't retain that in any type of a list. It's just kind of a one-off on that particular invoice or purchase order. But if you have something that goes on a lot of your documents, you can create that comment code and then just drop that in without having to retype the text on every single invoice and so forth. Now, if you have a standard statement that goes on everything, you also have the ability to modify your form within Crystal Reports to have it automatically print on your invoice form, your quote form, your sales order form. So you do have that ability as well. So when we get into the entry in just a few minutes, I'm going to show you how you can pull each of those in. Okay. All right. So that kind of takes us through a couple of the things that I wanted to highlight today on the setup. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into sales order, into the main tab, main folder, and we're going to go into sales order entry. And I'm not sure why that popped up. So with this in sales order entry, when I do a pre-upgrade analysis, if a client uses the sales order module, I will ask the question, do you do quotes in Sage 100? And I'm going to say that a lot of clients do not use that functionality, and it could be in many instances that they've always done it manually and they've just maybe thought they couldn't get their sales team on board to start actually using the system. Maybe they are a little hesitant to having their sales folks have access to Sage 100, but with user roles, you can specifically state exactly what they can do, so you can limit to what information that they have within your Sage 100 and what functionality. So you can get very granular with that, with the role maintenance if that is a concern for you. So to do a quote, you're going to go into sales order entry just like normal. You're going to assign the next number, and then it defaults to today's date. And the order type always defaults to standard order. But if I'm doing a quote, well, yes, not sure we got that. I'm going to select quote as the type. And then I'm just going to go through and pick my customer. They're probably not going to have a PO number if you're just in the quote phase. I can say when this quote expires. So if this quote expires in 30 days, I could then change the expiration date. I can override the confirm to, any email address, the ship to, their terms code, any of this information. I'm going to go to the Lines tab, and then this is where I'm going to list what I'm quoting them. So if I do a lookup under item code, I see my inventory management file. Basically, these are all of my inventory items. So I'm just going to grab this first desk, and let's say that they want a quote on 2 of these. And then let's say that we're going to go down, and in addition to the file, we're going to do a paper caddy. And they want a quote on 3 of these. So we have this information. If I wanted to add a comment on this line, I can. And then if I want to look up alias items, I have my little flashlight here. So in inventory, if you're using alias items, you have kit items you can look up. And then you also can take a quick look at the customer's last history here as well. So I'm going to put in my 2 inventory items so that I can, let me just grab this real quick just so you can look at the field down here. So you can also see what's listed down here. Okay. And then we're also going to talk about this drop ship in just a few minutes, because this is really important if you ever do any type of drop ships to your customers. So I'm going to go through, and I've got my orders. I'm going to click on my totals tab. And then at this point, I could go ahead and print the order. Say, yes, I want to save changes. And this part is just a little slow on my workstation. And I'm going to just do a plain form here and just do a quick preview. And this is actually what my quote is going to look like. Now, this is a generic out-of-the-box quote form. So obviously, as you know, you can drop in your logo. Again, you could, if you wanted to have a text box embedded within the form that talks about, you know, placing orders, or thank you for your business, or you've got a big promotion coming up, or anything like that, you can do that as well. So basically, then your salesperson can then send that quote to the customer. And I'll tell you something else that you can add to the quote that a lot of people do is you can embed into that crystal form an approval line for a signature. So you could have it say approved by, and have a line there when your salesperson sends it to them, whether it's electronically or they have a hard copy and they're going out and meeting with their client. If they accept that, then they can actually just sign that form as well. And then I'm going to show when you turn this quote into an invoice that you actually, if you have an electronic copy of their approval, that you can actually add that approval document to the invoice. So does anyone have any questions about the quote feature in Sage?
No questions.
Thank you. So going on that same path, so let's say that I do send that quote to my client, and they do want to accept my quote, and they sign off on it. And now I'm ready to actually turn that quote into a sales order so that it can be invoiced. So what you would do is you would go into your sales order entry, and you are going to select that quote. So you're going to bring up the exact quote. If for whatever reason the client says, yes, we want to accept it, but that last item that we had a quantity of 3, we really only need 2, I can go in at this point and change that quantity. I'm going to go back to my header tab, and I'm going to change this from a quote to a standard order. And at that point, I can basically turn this into a sales order. I can get it ready to be invoiced, or get it ready to accept the sales order so that I can then, send print picking sheets so that those items can be pulled and then it can be invoiced. And the memo feature, we've talked about this in probably every one of our webinars, that it can be used in multiple modules. This is the sales order memo. So what I could do is I could actually create a memo code called maybe approval of quote 178 by Pam. And then if I have an electronic copy of that approval, I can browse out and actually attach that file. I could put in additional notes here if I wanted to. And then I can accept that. And then that memo with that attachment actually then is tied to that sales order. So I could go in and take a look at that from history if I wanted to. So at this point, I'm basically turning that quote into a sales order, and then your process is the same from that point forward, as if you bypass the quote phase and you just go in and do sales order entry. So when I go to accept this, it says, do I want to promote this quote to a standard order? I'm going to say yes. And then basically it has converted that quote into a standard sales order. So again, if you're doing quotes manually, you might consider doing them within Sage. It will save you time. I mean, from entering a sales order, because you can turn that quote into a sales order. And then if you're doing the quotes or the sales order entry, then you can then turn that into an invoice without having to rekey everything. So I think most folks do sales orders, whether or not they actually send them to their customer. But some people, if you choose to go directly into sales order invoice data entry, you can do that as well. So are there any questions about that, Jody?
One question, we use boilerplate language on our quotes. Can that be added into the quote form in Sage 100?
So they have a boilerplate statement that they use on every quote, and they're asking if that quote could be added to or if that statement could be added to the generic quote form in Crystal. Is that correct?
I think they mean as a second page terms and conditions.
Oh, okay. I believe the answer to that is yes. I'm almost positive we have done that before for some clients. It's not as cut and dry as adding, just a blurb on the existing form, but I am almost positive that could be done. What I would suggest, if the person that is asking this question is an Oasis client, would be to send us a copy of their forms and what they would be, looking to add, and then we could advise them on how labor intensive that might be, and then they could decide whether they wanted to go that route.
Great, thank you. That was the only question.
Okay, all right, thank you. So a couple of other things that you can do within sales order entry. So I'm just going to give this a new sales order number. So if you notice, we've talked about quotes and we've talked about standard orders. We're going to now talk about master orders and repeating orders. So the difference between the two A master order is, an example would be your client tells you at the beginning of the year, over the next 12 months, I think that we probably will want to order 150 of these paper caddies. So if I tell you that in the next 12 months, we guarantee that we're going to order 100 of these, what kind of price break can you give me? So we make a deal with our client, so we're going to say that they want to order 100, and we're going to do it for $38. If they order 100, so price for 2019. When I have that master order, again, this is saying that I'm probably going to order 100 of those over a period of time. Then what you do, as the customer wants to get some of these items shipped. So January they may want 12. February may be a slow month for them and they only want 2, but they're going to space that 100 out over a year or whatever time frame that you two have agreed upon. Then you're going to create the master order. And then when the client is ready to take some of those, you're going to go into sales order entry. You're going to give it a sales order number. You're going to issue a standard order, but you're going to reference that master order that I just created, which is this right here. So I'm going to grab this master order. When I go to the lines tab, it's going to drop in that 100, but let's say they really only want 10 this month. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that there's 10. And then I will accept that order. I'll send it to invoicing, and then they're going to get billed for 10 of those. If I go back in before I have invoiced it, and I take a look at my master order, I can see where it's tracking how many that they've ordered against the original. So they've guaranteed they're going to buy 100. And by looking at this, I can tell that they still have to place an order for 90 before the end of the year. So it tracks that. It really doesn't do anything with it, but it does give you a quick look if you're trying to say, well, they were going to order 100. How many have they ordered? And you're looking at this and thinking, well, it's already the middle of June, and they've already only taken possession of 10 of those. Maybe I need to call them and, kind of find out when are they going to take the other 90 and make sure there's no issues. So that is a master order, okay? So a repeating order would be something more of in the realm of it's something that they're going to order, this is going to sound crazy, on a repeating basis. So let's say every month they're going to order some of the same items month after month after month. So what you can do is give it a sales order number, and then you're going to say that this is a repeating order. You'll notice it brings up a new field for me, which is a cycle code. And that cycle code is basically a field where you can indicate how often they are going to be placing an order with you. So maybe this is something that's going to happen monthly, and you might use M for the code. You might also use W for weekly if they place weekly orders with you. You can select the customer, the last order date, and the last order number is something that's automatically going to be tracked so that you can take a look to see what history of what standard orders have been issued against this repeating order. You can also give this repeating order an expiration date if you choose to. You're going to go to your Lines tab, And then this is where you're going to go in and list what they're telling you that they're probably going to order on a monthly basis. And I'm just going to grab a couple things here. And give you another, show you another way that some clients do this. So let's say that this particular customer, so this example is, I'm just doing a repeating order for the 3 items that they've told me they're going to order week after week. Some clients may have customers that order any combination of 40 different line items. So you could actually set up a repeating order with all 50 of those line items. You could leave the quantity ordered at 0, and then when they place the order, you could turn that into a standard order and then just fill in the blanks. Now, I'm not quite sure if that made sense, but let me show you an example of that, because that will save a lot of data entry. And we do have several folks that do this. So let me just show you an example of what I'm talking about. And I'm just going to start grabbing items. So again, you know, I might have 100 different line items on this repeating order, and I'm leaving all the quantity at 0. So then next month they say, okay, of all those items we order from you, here's the items that we want and how many we want of each. So you would issue a sales order. You would reference that repeating order, go to the Lines tab, and then if they're ordering 2 of item number 2, you could fill that in. If they're ordering 5, you could fill that in. And let's say they're ordering 3 of these and 1 of these. So you can see that instead of having to add every single line item, then I can pick and choose the ones they're choosing to order. I can leave these other on here as 0, or I can actually remove that line item, which is removing it from the sales order. It is not removing those line items from the repeating order. So it's almost like a template for your client. Now, if you say, well, they could order one of 2,000 different items, you probably don't want to build a template with 2,000 items on it and then have to kind of clean it up. I think there would be too much room for error unless they're ordering most of those 2,000 items on a routine basis. But that is kind of a shortcut where you can create a template to kind of for much quicker data order entry. So does anybody have any questions about that?
No, I don't see any questions.
Okay. So one thing I want to talk about with sales order entry or invoice data entry is if you notice you have these additional fields at the bottom, and one of them is drop ship. So if you ever drop ship items to your customer, that's where you would go in and check that box. And it's on a line-by-line basis. And Sage determines how they define a drop ship is that it assumes that your vendor is going to ship it directly to your customer and that it is never going to come into your inventory. So you are never going, so when you invoice this particular item is showing that it's a drop ship, so it is not going to come out of inventory. If you're using the purchase order module and you've issued a PO for this item to your vendor to drop ship to your customer, it is essential that on the PO and the sales order, stating that both of those are drop ship. Because if you're not consistent and you do the purchase order as a drop ship, but the salesperson doesn't do the sales order side as a drop ship, then on the PO side, it's a drop ship. It's never going to expect you to do a receipt of goods because it's saying, hey, it's never going to come into my warehouse. But if the salesperson forgets to check this box, then when you sell it, it's going to take one out of inventory. So then your inventory is going to be skewed because you're not doing that drop ship correctly. So if you use drop ships and you use the purchase order module and the sales order module, the line item that's being drop shipped must be checked in both places. Okay? Any questions about that? I know a lot of times inventory gets messed up because of drop ships not being managed properly.
No questions on dropship.
Okay, all right. So, so after you've printed your orders and you've got your orders in, then what most folks do is they go into the picking sheet printing. Now, what a picking sheet is it's basically a document that you can send out to your warehouse so that they can pull those items and then let you know what has been pulled and ready to be invoiced. So some folks just take that sales order and give a copy to the warehouse person, but you also have this picking sheet. The thing about the picking sheet, too, is if you have your printers networked, you could actually do your picking sheet printing to the printer in the warehouse so that, anytime they walk by that printer in the warehouse, they can just grab any picking sheets that happen to be there so that they can start pulling those items. So this, again, is just the generic picking sheet. You can make changes to it, obviously, if you want to. But basically, it's going to base it on the sales order number, the customer, and it's going to show what was on that sales order and how many have been ordered. And then your warehouse personnel are going to pick those items, and they're going to then write in how many have been shipped or how many are on back order. And then typically what happens, some people then will use this as a packing slip with the items. You can make a copy and do that if you want to. But then they also return a copy of this to the accounting department so that the accounting department then can go into invoice data entry and say, okay, we shipped 4 of these, but we only shipped 1 of these. And then that sales order will remain in a back order status until that remaining 1 is shipped. So, so you do have the picking sheet feature. And with that, there's another function in Sage that most people do not use, but there's actually a whole shipping feature where, I'm not sure if we have it turned on here. Yeah, we do. So what you can do is, instead of printing that picking sheet and it being a manual process, if you're using shipping data entry and your warehouse staff have a workstation and access to the shipping data entry, they can go in and actually enter in what has been shipped, can create a packing slip to put with the shipment, and then if you want them to, they can turn that into an invoice. Most folks don't want the shippers to do the invoicing, but you have it more automated where you can then turn that into an invoice without there being any type of real manual entry. So again, this feature I find that most individuals do not use, and I'm not sure if it's because they have their manual system down pat and it just seems to work well, and they don't want to have to kind of deal with the change. But you do have the shipping data entry, and that has been available in Sage for several versions now. You just have to set it up in the options that you want to use the shipping data entry. And then you actually, if you're using the shipping data entry, then you actually, your shippers or your warehouse folks actually are given IDs and passwords. And then you say what they're allowed to do within the system. So, Jody, it looks like we might have a question. Or did we already answer the question?
I was having trouble getting to my unmute button.
Sorry.
I don't see the question.
Okay. It may be one that we've already answered. It says, can you filter this area by date? Can you please add a little more information to your question? I may have gone past that area, so can you tell me what you're asking if we can filter by date? And then I'll be glad to take a look at that. So anyway, I don't know if any of you use the shipping feature, but it is something that that you do have within Sage 100. So if the person that asked about the filter wouldn't mind to go ahead and to clarify that a little bit, I'll be glad to address it. And then kind of the final thing I wanted to talk about is in the sales order module, there are various ways that you can purge information. So you can purge expired orders and quotes. You can purge obsolete sales order based on a particular date. So let's say that you're like, okay, if we have sales orders out there that are still dated from 2017, I just want to go ahead and remove them from the system. Okay, Jody, did the question pop back up?
It did, and they clarified the picking sheet printing. Can you print the picking sheets by date?
By the date of the order? I'm not quite sure I fully understand the question. You basically print the picking sheets by either by a range of order numbers, or if you have multiple warehouses, you could pull all of the orders of the picking sheets for warehouse 1 versus warehouse 2. You can't really do it by an order date. What most people do is when you do the sales order printing, so as soon as you finish your sales order entry and you do the printing, it asks you at that point if you want to print the picking sheets, and you have the option to do it at that level, and it will print a picking sheet for any sales order that is in your system that has not previously printed the picking sheet. So once you print a picking sheet on a sales order, it knows that it's been printed. You can reprint it, but that way when you print all, it doesn't print everything that you have in your system. So you can't really do it by date. Most individuals just really do it on a daily basis, or they might do it, every time that there's a sales order entered, they automatically do a picking sheet and send it out to the warehouse. So I'm not really sure that that's answering your question, but just in general, the selection range for a picking sheet is by order number or warehouse code. So if you want to follow up with us after the webinar and maybe provide a scenario of why that you need to do it by date, then we can take a look and see if there are options to do that, or if there are not options, what it would take in order to have that ability.
Great. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. All right. So going back to the utilities here, again, you have the where you can basically purge out expired orders and quotes, obsolete sales orders. You can purge order and quote history, lot and serial history. So you can purge. You have the ability to purge a lot of data, and most of them will kind of give you an as of date. You want to purge anything out as of such and such date. You want to be careful that only certain folks have the permissions to get into this area, because if you accidentally purge something out and put in a wrong date, there's no way to unpurge it. So if you have a massive cleanup, let's say that you're new to your company and you're seeing purchase orders that are out there that are 10 years old, that's never going to be fulfilled, and you just want to clean up a bunch of stuff, what I would suggest that you do is before you start is make a good backup of your system, then go in and do the purges that you want to do, double check and make sure everything looks correct. If you accidentally purge the wrong information, then you're going to want to do a restore, but kind of plan that process just so that you limit the risk of error. So you always want to be careful when you're purging, and again, you want to limit through role maintenance who has the ability to purge, because they may accidentally go into this thinking they're doing one thing when they're doing another, and then you're going to be calling saying, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden our data disappeared. And then we kind of have to go back and do some research, and then hopefully you'll have a good backup and won't have lost too much work. So that really kind of gets us through the sales order tips and tricks that I was going to cover today. I will do a plug for our Sage 100 user group meeting. Our next user group meeting is on June the 27th. It's a half day, the morning of June 27th at the University of Louisville Shelby campus, which is at Shelbyville Road, Hurstbourne Lane. So if you have not registered, please do. It's not too late to register. If you have not received notifications about the agenda and how to register, if you will let me know at pam@oasisky.com, we will certainly send another invitation over to you. It's free. It's going to be jam-packed with information, and we'd love to see you there. So again, it's not too late to register if you're interested. And I will open it up one last time to see if there are any final questions from the group. And if not, then we will go ahead and end our session for today.
Pam, I don't see any additional questions, so just one to follow up with, and we have that contact information. So we'll get back to you regarding that picking sheet by date. If that's
okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.